Hello, this is Terry Arnold of the IBC Network Talk IBC podcast. I'm very excited to have with me today Dr. Naoto Ueno. He is now with the University of Hawaii Cancer Center. You and I first met when you were head of the Morgan Welch Clinic in Houston, Texas. By the way, on a personal note, I miss seeing you, so I'm really happy to see you here today.
Aloha, Terry, and it's very nice to really join this podcast, and I'm excited to, go over science and some of the political thing that's ongoing at this point.
Well, that's very exciting. We're recording this in May, at the end of May of 2025. So there's going to be some different political conversations coming into, but I would like to hear about, of course, everything. You know me, I want everything. I would
Mhm.
like to hear about what it's like to be in Hawaii with your research, what's going on. Tell me, I know you've got a lot of strong ties still in Japan. I want to hear everything. So let's start at the beginning. What has it been like to land in Hawaii after being at MD Anderson? It's quite a change, I understand.
It's a big change because you're comparing to a place with a lot of resource at MD Anderson and limited resource, which is in Hawaii. So, the best way to describe it is like a car, right? So everybody drives a car and it goes to a certain distance and it will perform. So if you take MD Anderson, it's like a Porsche, and I'm driving now a Corolla or Toyota, you know, and that's what it is. And if I have to get a spare tire, then it makes it more difficult. Now that's because of the historical aspect that we're located, and we have a significant cancer health disparity, which is coming from poverty, geographic isolation. And you have to also remember, depending on your race uh, or ethnicity, the cancer death rate is significantly different. And this is particularly among the native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and Filipino, comparing to white or Japanese American. It's the outcome is very different. And this is not simply because of the access, but there's a biological difference, and that's one of the top priority of our cancer center. So our flagship priority is to understand and addressing health disparity. So we're tackling this complicated issue with limited resource. So that's really at the personal level. It's tough and it's a shock, but I enjoy what I'm doing in a capacity of what I could do, and I have a much more macro type of work I do. Yeah.
It's interesting you would say this. I remember when you first told me you were leaving. I've never been to Hawaii and I hope to come and visit you soon. There's things I would like to do up there with you, especially in the fundraising element. But I just hear it's really beautiful. And
Hmm.
then we don't pull to help because you just mentioned, I know access to care can be a problem, but you just mentioned the biological differences that are
Hmm.
getting in the way. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more? Or do you want to continue on
I'm happy
about your
to do.
research?
So, um, yeah, we are all human being, and the basic stuff is that there's not much of a difference, but there are difference in terms of like methylation of the genes, and this is how the gene, which is really the mapping of your how you're going to look or how you're going to behave, and it's not there is this what they call methylation. It's different depending on the race, so therefore when you give a drug, how you metabolize a drug could be different. Your cancer could behave different. And this is similar in inflammatory breast cancer. So we're very much interested in inflammatory breast cancer based on race, what is the outcome difference. And we know that like black comparing to the white, we have some, well, I think it's been studied in Duke also, but black compared to white, the outcome is worse. When you look into Native Hawaiian and combined with Asian, the outcome is better. Now, that said, that if you look into more in detail, the Native Hawaiian, there seems to be more inflammatory breast cancer. But it's very difficult to really dissect this data. And the reason is historically, once that Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and Asian is all put together as a one lump of sum. And that's a problem for us because it's a completely different, it's like combining black and white together and try to do epidemiology. So we're the coding of who's Native Hawaiian versus Asian American is not done in North America, in the United States. So
Okay.
in Hawaii, we're working on this to separate the coding so that we could have a better understanding of exactly what is happening.
I think that's exciting. I know that's one of the reasons that you've been so involved in Japan because what you saw there.
Right. So, proximity to not just Japan, but Asia, obviously Hawaii is in a very much closer than going to like Washington, D.C. D.C. will take 10 hours. Japan will only take about 7 to 8 hours. So there is definitely a proximity, and you have to remember that our demographic, probably about more than 50% were Asian descendants. So yes, it is. There's a cultural impact, and we are exploring whether we could actually conduct clinical trials, not just with U.S. Clinical trial group, but also like in Japan is something that we're currently exploring what we could do.
That I know that would be amazing. I know that you've taken me with you to Japan a few times, and it was very interesting to see the cultural differences. As much as Japan is this incredibly sophisticated, high-tech society, very beautiful clothes, everything's so couture. Different social elements
Mhm.
get in the way of talking about cancer.
That's correct. And
And
then understanding the social difference and culturally difference is very important. And even taking care of the patient is important. So you'll probably notice that if you go to MD Anderson, when I was taking care of patient, we didn't particularly emphasize a cultural difference too much, despite that we say these things. Is that happening at the clinical level? The answer is not really. I mean, it's pretty much everybody is treated in a way the same. And I think the same in terms of quality of care is very important. But I think in all of our minds that what I believe, religious belief or cultural belief, they're all different, right? And how do you do that? And that is clearly that it's a much more there's a contrast that's coming out much more clearly when you live in Hawaii, when there is no uh, kind of a one demographic being representing strongly, and everybody has their opinion. So we have no majority. We're very diverse. We're considered one of the most diverse state in the United States, and it's interesting. I don't have a really answer of solving these things, but the awareness of culturally sensitive approach for providing better care is very important.
it's fascinating for me because especially when you see Japan being such a sophisticated, forward country, the
Mhm.
fact that to talk about having cancer would not be viewed as something comfortable. It was interesting you telling me what you're telling me now. Can we talk about the research you're doing right now? You took a lot of research with you, I
Mhm.
guess, because you took a lot of researchers with you who were very interested in this program. And I remember you telling me they were being very brave because like you said earlier, they're not driving the Ferrari. They didn't have as many unlimited resources. They were having to create a lot of things. There
Mhm.
wasn't the same big budgets. And then obviously we can talk about budget cuts soon. What's real, what's not real. But let's talk about the research first, because
Right,
that's what people really want to know.
right. So, our research is really trying to understand why inflammatory breast cancer behaves aggressively, and not just behaving aggressively. What's the really, molecular level cause that's causing this? So we have dissected initially more of a targeting like on the surface called EGFR, and eventually we went to the level of in the DNA level or transcriptional factor, which is really regulating DNA, and there is a target called EGR1. So that's really the fundamental area of component to it, and we think this is one of the important target in inflammatory breast cancer. And this EGR1 not just regulate the cancer, but it regulates the surrounding of the cancer called tumor microenvironment. So we have data that how this is impacting the surrounding of the cancer. And then by suppressing this, it helps to shrink the tumor and make the cancer less sensitive. And it could make the immunotherapy to be more effective. So we want to target this EGR1. So from here, I can't really go in too much in details, but over this past 2 years, we have been successful developing new drug. So now the new drug is the conceptual part is almost done. And really, we need to convert and translate so that it is something that we could bring it into the clinic. And that's the area that we're focusing, and we're tackling this from multiple angles so that within this 1 or 2 years that we really could talk about that this is an important target. So yeah, that's
So this is
really
some of the research that the IBC network has funded. And so the idea that
right.
maybe would it be possible to consider this might be ready for a clinical trial in 2 years? Or is that too soon?
Probably 3 to 4 years is what I'd like
4
to
years.
aim.
And see, that's one of the
Right, if
things
you
that's
say one
so
to 2 years,
hard.
it's gonna be a lie, but it's rapidly progressing, and
Good.
um, and I can't go in detail because it does involve intellectual property, and it's important to preserve that component. But we're excited about type of the research we're doing. Yeah.
Well, I know you are, and I'm glad that you're doing it. I just wish science could be faster, but I know there's reasons for it to be slow, for safety and proper testing and things, but also to see progress. And funding is a big part of your progress. So can we talk
That,
about what's happening right now? Some people say it's a hot mess right now. Some people
it is
think it
a
is.
kind of a
A lot of people don't
difficult.
want to talk about it. You, though, are always willing to talk about everything. So what do you want to
Well,
say
I
about
mean,
funding?
there's nothing to hide about what's going on. Okay, so it's not that I want to talk everything about it, but um, it's important to talk is my position in a very rational way, in a constructive way. So we recognize that the current administration direction has changed, and it's a reality, and we have to accept this. We don't know exactly where we stand, and we're having this conversation at the last week of May, and we don't know how exactly they're going to be cutting the budget. We know it's about 40% or 31 to 40%, but that is a more of an NIH. And then we also know that this is trickle down to NCI. And then the question is this going to be an individual grant, or is it going to be more cut in the more of a programmatic type of cut, or is it going to be the support to the cancer center? So we have different buckets of money. So until we see that, and until the budget is really confirmed. As you know, President Trump has put his budget already, and but that budget has to be further negotiated with between the Congress and Senate. So now it went to the Senate, and Senate has lots of different opinion, and so until we see this, we don't know, right? And then there's a 15% cut of the what we call indirect. Indirect is to help multiple surrounding support of the grant activities, and it's a very important. Many places, the indirect cost is above 50%. So it's really a gap between 50 and 15. So even that, there was an injunction filed by 22 states, mostly Democratic states, and we don't know this injunction is going to be more of a permanent one. And even if you block it, does the administration going to honor? We don't know. So I'm giving you a lot of I don't know, and
To
so
have this conversation because, budget cuts are always scary, but I know with my household, I have to look at my spending, I have to look at what I have, I have to make corrections and things like that. But also too, I think people have no clue where funding comes from. And so you got the NIH and the DoD, and there's a third larger that comes
well,
in
there's an NIH. Okay, so the way you have to look the pocket of money is the biggie one is NIH and
right?
NSF. Okay, so
NSF.
NSF, a lot of people forget about it, but NSF is really where the fundamental research, and it's not always biomedical, it's not biomedical research, but many times we collaborate for biomedical research. NIH is for biomedical research. DoD and other agency kind of stands in between. So both NIH and NSF is impacted significantly, and we don't talk a lot about NSF, but NSF is equally important to NIH. I don't
Yeah.
know if that kind of makes sense. And
That, well, that's okay. And then you've got the Department of Defense, which is funding.
right.
That's the
Yeah, so
DoD.
yeah, and then here we have BCRF and other like a funding agency, your agent, I wouldn't call your agency, but your activity ongoing. So we are going to have a challenging time, and whether you call it challenging time or it's a new era of how we see biomedical research and funding, and I've been telling my staff that it will be mixed funding in the future. So yes, I encourage all my faculty to apply for these grant agency, and but funding a project only by federal funding, that type of funding mechanism is probably it's gone now. So it has to be federal plus industry or federal plus philanthropic activities, and so it's going to be mixed funding, right? So
And I hate to see something gone, but also too, I think this is a really important time for people to step up and not to put in a plug for the IBC network. But the thing is, even if the funding wasn't gone, what got me started wanting to start the charity and funding is a researcher showed me his paper, and he'd gotten a perfect score. But then they triaged the papers and they kind of want the best bang for the buck. Well, his paper, because it was all inflammatory, was at the bottom of the list. And they wrote pay if and pay if they have it. So even though he had a perfect score, by the time they paid the ones they felt like were more powerful, would affect more people, there was no money left for his paper. And then I just got a major paper that got a perfect score from another facility the other day. And they're like, can you help us with this? Because even though we got a perfect score, by the time they got to us, there was no money left. And I don't think we think about the fact that they triage it, that rare diseases get less money. And I know
right.
people sometimes will say to me, why should I care about inflammatory? I don't have that kind of cancer or whatever. I feel very strongly if we can stop an aggressive, fast growing cancer, it would apply to less aggressive. forms of breast cancer. That just makes sense to me.
Well, I think what you're telling is storytelling of what you're advocating is very important. So I could wear two hats, right? So if I was an IBC researcher, I agree with what you're saying, and that's, you have to push the agenda so that your priority improves. When I wear my hat as a director, it's not only IBC. People work on multiple different cancer, different type of gaps that they want to address. So, but we recognize that many people have their good story, but the good story is not always advocated. And if you advocate the story appropriately in the right context, that it's not about only science, it's a science plus the story. And and unfortunately, that story part is commonly missing, and it's something that as a director, I always encourage my faculty to talk with the community like you, and talk with different advocates, utilize social media and engage, in different level of community science as well as non-science. So it's a multifaceted approach is needed. And we all know this story. It's nothing new I'm telling you, right? But given that I think the shock wave or that's given by the current administration, we have to further take this storytelling or engagement with a community to the next level. And that's what we're seeing. And so it's kind of even a shock for people who haven't done those things in the past. People who have done those, it's really more about totality of how much money I get or I don't get, right? So is this a difficult time? Yes, it is difficult because suddenly I'm being telling by that we may lose a lot of money, and what are we going to do? So we're scrambling of how we're going to be doing this. But
People, though,
we, we
they
will we
sometimes have
will re we will recover eventually. Okay, we will. I'm
that's good to
confident.
know.
Yeah.
I believe we will recover eventually too. I do wonder about the harm done in the meantime, but also I'm like you. I want to talk about everything. I don't want to fight about everything. I want to get into solutions. I don't want to be playing the blame game. I'm like, okay, this is what's happening. What do we do to fix it?
Right.
And that is definitely why I started the IBC network. Now, um, I would like to plan something with you. I was hoping we could do it this December of 25, but that's probably too soon. There's this race that goes on in Hawaii every December, a big marathon, and the IBC
Honolulu.
network's been
Very, very popular.
approached. I
Yes.
know we've been approached by a group that says that they will help us get bibs for these races. So I want to see a fun run for with the IBC network.
Let's do that. I mean, I think that the visibility, of course, there's a lot of different, community people trying to sell their things, but Honolulu Marathon is really popular here. So and
I
it's
would love to see the
fun,
marathon tie into the IBC network for 2026 in December 2026 so that run money can then go to your research and we can bring more visibility to inflammatory. Because, like just the other day, I was looking at a beautiful teaching education in a breast center at a major cancer hospital. And of course, inflammatory wasn't mentioned. And I would love to bring, I hate the word awareness. I want education, I want mastery to you. So hopefully we can put something together. But when you just mentioned the importance of conversation, how do we get people talking about what we need to do in Hawaii?
uh, it goes two ways, and um, we just have to spread more educational material with a different social media outlet. And it's not even Twitter or X anymore. And you have to mobilize Instagram, TikTok, and the content has to be. somewhat create needs to be created by a different generation. Each of the generation have a different, what the need is, and you have to have a really a social, savvy, strategic, communication officer who understand the issue. It's something. It's not easy, and we even at our cancer center, like MD Anderson, we have a different outlet of pushing out the information, but sometimes the content is a little bit too dry. So,
No,
uh,
I love that you say that because I people think I spend all my time planning fundraisers, and I don't actually spend a lot of time doing other things. And but I tell you what, I spend a lot of time doing is begging for stories. I beg for stories.
right,
And people sometimes will be shy to tell me their story because they're like, "Oh, my story's not that interesting." It's like, no,
right, and
your
then
story's gonna
I
your
think,
story's gonna mirror somebody's story. It's gonna educate somebody. It's gonna touch somebody. It's gonna save a life. And I would love you to go back and to
but telling
encourage
a
your patients
story,
to share stories with us.
right, but telling us stories requires training. That's something I know I learned. We all ask for story, and I tell the same thing for my faculty, but I can't get their story because they don't know what to say.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe I need to put some more time in with prompts and training and making them comfortable because I find
There
their
is a
stories interesting.
training needed. So we do training with so we have selected a few faculty who is naturally good at presentation, but really even with really smart people, they need training, including myself. So
Well, and you've been very transparent with your stories about you going through cancer, which I think brings a sensitivity that is unique to you, to your patients.
mhm,
And I'm proud of you for doing that because I think sometimes we hold back and you don't hold back.
right. It's finding that right sweet spot for telling the story and adding that emotional component or or better way to say is that how to connect with people you don't know. It's not an easy thing. Um and I could go sometimes too far and sometimes I could be not enough to be empathetic. And Terry, you're giving up very challenging questions. I don't even have a clear-cut answer to it. And a lot of people like to believe that our physicians who are advocating for your disease, like inflammatory breast cancer, they know what they're doing, but they don't. It's media out, providing that information. It's called community outreach and engagement, which is really an important part of NCI Designated Cancer Center activities. And our cancer center is one of the really the best in doing this, but even doing this, it takes a lot of effort to, you know, reach out. And we do this engagement not just as a broad community committee, but we have Native Hawaiian committee, we have Pacific Island the committee, and we have Filipino committee. Depending on where the big gap is, we have to even create additional committees so that we really are trying to understand what's happening in the community. It can't be a one-way message, and it's
No,
not easy.
no, it's not easy. And, I could talk to you all day long, and I always find it very interesting. But one of the things we were talking about earlier, if we started, is what are, people worry about waste and medicine and things like that. You mentioned earlier how you think artificial intelligence could be a really way to streamline, to make things faster, more efficient. Would you like to comment on that? Because some people think it's going to be wonderful, some people are scared of it. What are your thoughts on that? I know we've been using it in medicine for a very long time. People just didn't know.
That's correct. AI is always included in many of the technology. You just don't know. And then that's what the AI eventually should be. So when you look into inefficiency that people talk about how grant is administered, Yes, there's a lot of redundancy, inefficiency. So if the AI is truly accurately able to do this, I think there's going to be an improvement. And maybe it is true that indirect costs could be reduced. Uh,
Well, like from what I understand, mammograms have been read by AI for years to
yes.
just to streamline. Because you think about the volume of mammograms the center does in a year, how could a person keep up? So they run through AI and then they get to you too.
Correct. I mean, imaging reading or even like whole body scanning could be done. And some one of our researchers doing those things because you say that, oh, we're gonna look for, make sure that you don't have any kind of skin changes that's gonna be leading to melanoma. Our eyes is somewhat limited, right? So you could scan and AI could actually help to say that this spot is suspicious. So, doc, you need to take a look of that area. So there's a lot of exciting component to the AI. And going back to that inefficiency or, we're spending unnecessary time to really figure out administration or even tech, laboratory research it it will I'm on the more optimistic side that it will improve. But you're right. It has to be a accurate, right? And it has to be seamless. And you don't want based on AI that we create AI refugee. Like, the people you just said that they're afraid of it and they're not gonna touch it or they're not gonna do anything then they're going to be behind. We don't want that. Everybody needs to benefit from the AI. So we just have to be very conscious about what we're doing.
Well, I know you're a busy guy and I could talk to you all day, and I personally miss you because I consider you a friend. You have been so kind to me because when I first met you, here you were the director of this clinic, and you always gave me a place at the table. You always treated me and the other advocates with respect and were open, and you gave us a chance to ask questions and not make us feel foolish, but also taught us some things and guided us to, and I appreciate that openness. And I would love to continue being supportive to you in Hawaii. So I would love to do something with you to bring some physicality to what you're doing. And also, I'm very interested in the research because we have helped funded some of it. I'm hoping to continue funding it. I think it's really good that you broke down some of these government cuts. And because, by the way, these cuts haven't been implemented yet as of May of 25.
There has just to be accurate that there has been some work stop orders on certain grants
Yes, there
happening,
has been work
but
stop
those are
orders.
right. So those are more like clearly that it's related to DEI, or there has been some that I don't even understand why they stopped it. But the massive cut that we're talking about has not reached to the center yet. That's what.
The work stop orders that I'm aware of have been mainly about travel. That's what
No,
I
well,
heard.
the work stop order I'm talking about is from NIH saying that your grant is not going to be funded anymore.
Got it.
And then there are some grants, including ours, we have been not formally notified, but it's been notified by the program officer. So that is a great concern, and we are working with our local federal representative to see if we could push back. So.
Well, this is where I'm going to do a shameless plug for the IBC Network Foundation because organizations like us, obviously, the really big money comes from these organizations you're talking about. They're the ones giving millions, but there's no reason that we couldn't be that too. And also, how do you think pharma is uh, reacting to some of these things? I think a lot of people have a lot of anger at pharma saying, oh, they're just making big bank, but they also spend a lot of money
They
with this
do.
research, a lot of investment.
Yes, and I'm not gonna be able to really, critique about how much money they should be making, but they are spending a lot of money to research. But now, given the situation, I talked about mixed funding, and I do request that pharma to be paying more attention to provide external funding for academic researcher because many of the drug original idea is coming from academic. So not just internal funding of their pharmaceutical company, but external, and then have a much more open space under confidential agreement so that they could share reagent or drugs that allows to grow our research. And that's what I mean by mixed funding. And then there's also philanthropic activity like yours, um, and there's also BCRF and Coleman, all these things, but they are like they are very important because sometimes these money is a trigger of doing something really innovative, something that you never thought about it by pharma or by from NIH. And so everybody has its own important role, but it's the the era of NIH alone is over, is the way I see it. It's a mix. We have to understand that we have to go through this mixed funding.
I remember one particular project we gave one of your researchers $180,000, and that was the seed money that she needed. And she went, it was either to the NIH or the DoD, and got like $2.8 million. And if she hadn't had that seed money, she couldn't have gotten that bigger money. And that's someplace the IBC network is important. We can give that seed money, but we want to also be the bigger money too.
Right.
Uh,
And then that
because
funding
again,
resulted into the potential new target for drug creation. And we're actually going to apply for a new grant, but at the same time, we need these money to accelerate the process, and that's the ask I discussed with you. Yep.
right. Well, one of the things is we've talked about a few things, but is there anything you want to say before we go? Because you made a statement when we were starting that I want to wrap up with. Is there anything that we didn't get to cover that you wanted to cover today?
Uh, no, I think we covered a lot, but as I said that I wouldn't get too pessimistic about what's happening in the world. There's a lot of good people trying to figure out, how we could work all together. And at the same time, I think it's important to voice our concerns and opinion. This is not about to fight with somebody, but if we are silent and it doesn't go anywhere. Now, at the same time, there's IBC research and it's rare and aggressive. And further, if you don't, voice your opinion, we're putting ourselves in a more difficult position. So we don't want that. So for the research of IBC, we need to have a strong voice. And under the current condition, it has to be even getting to more unified voice rather than
Yes.
everybody just talking here and there. So
A strong mirrored message is very important. Well,
right.
you said something earlier. You said that science is always exciting. And I that made me just smile so big when you said that because I think it's exciting. Um, I wish it wasn't necessary, but I do see advancements. And so I think that's
Yeah.
a great thing to wrap up with, that thought.
I agree. I'm optimistic about that good thing will continue to happen, but we have to continue to push this real hard to make that progress.
Well, I hope people will contact you at
Yes,
the University of Hawaii Cancer Center. I hope you follow Dr. Ueno's social media. I don't know how you do it. I've walked down a hall with you before where you had your phone out and you were literally texting someone in Japanese and talking to me in English and then sending out an email at the same time. I mean, you can multitask like nobody I've ever seen, but they can find you on all forms of social media. You have many, many papers published that they can access easily. And so I hope people do contact you. And I would
great,
love to see a really strong showing at a race that I want to plan for in December of 26 so we can bring strong attention. And if you've got some ideas of things you want us to do up there in Hawaii before then, I would love to be a support to you through the IBC Network Foundation.
great. Thank you very much. Mahalo nui loa.
Thank you, sir.